Hello everyone, welcome to From the Star Wars Library, where Star Wars is in print, the Force is with the readers, and we return to the Del Rey novels in 1983 for the first one in 3 years. I'm your host, Nathan P. Butler. The book we're looking at this time is the first of the Lando Calrissian Adventures. There had not been a new original fiction Star Wars novel since 1980 with Han Solo and the Lost Legacy. Now, one thing I didn't show you with that one is a bit about the cover art. Han Solo and the Lost Legacy we took a look at. Notice there the picture of Han and Chewbacca up at the top. I'm trying to lift it up so it's not going to reflect much off the screen for you. But notice the pose that Han is in there and the bluish skull underneath. That is the image they used to create the small image of Han on the cover of the Han Solo Adventures when they took the three of them by Brian Daley, put them together, and created this omnibus edition. Now, in 1994, of course, we saw another omnibus. This one, the way that you're more likely to see this trilogy in many people's collection, the Lando Calrissian Adventures, including all three of the books by L. Neil Smith. That cover image of Lando with the Millennium Falcon also comes from one of the books in the series, in this case, the first, the one we're taking a look at right now, Lando Calrissian and the Mindharp of Sharu, again, by L. Neil Smith. Now, if you remember, one of the things that happened with Brian Daley's Han Solo novels is they had to come up with some setting, some authority, something for Han and Chewie to go up against that wasn't the Empire, because they couldn't really define much new about the Empire and such while the films were still going. Same kind of thing was happening with the Lando Calrissian stuff, only at this point, all the films were out in theaters. Of course, this is still in an era in which Lucas was telling us that, this is just one trilogy. He was eventually going to make a prequel and a sequel trilogy, a saga of 9, so the chances were that we might see some things defined in novels that maybe they didn't necessarily want to see defined just yet, at least at this era of the publishing cycle. So all of these stories wind up in a place called the centrality. So we have new planets, new perils, so to speak, using the tagline from, I guess it was Star Wars number 7 from Marvel Comics. New planets, new perils. And in this case, we have Lando aboard the Millennium Falcon. This is shortly after he won the Millennium Falcon. It is before he loses it to Han Solo, hence putting this before the Han Solo Adventures. They are the earliest books in the original Del Rey line of Star Wars novels chronologically, albeit the last ones produced in publication order. So, Lando winds up winning a bet, and in that bet he wins a new droid. The droid is known as Vufi Ra. We'll learn more about Vufi Ra as the series continues. At this point, he's this weird tentacle droid who belonged to a man named Whet, W-H-E-T-T, who was just another gambler, as far as Lando is concerned. But Otdefa Osuno Whet, the guy's name, try saying that 3 times fast, kind of double-crosses Lando. He wins the droid, only the droid isn't there. The droid is in the Rafa system on the planet Rafa 4, which happens to be the place that used to be the home of this ancient civilization known as the Sharu that have apparently mysteriously disappeared sometime in the ancient past. So he winds up getting there, and he reclaims the droid and everything, but he winds up running afoul of Dutz Mur, or Dutz Mur, D-U-T-T-E-S Mur, who is the governor of the system, who winds up basically bringing up trumped-up charges against him as a way of forcing Lando to help them find what is known as the Mindharp of Sharu, this ancient artifact from this civilization. And Mur is in league with a sorcerer of Tund named Rokur Gepta. And Rokur Gepta, he's kind of the mysterious, shadowy, mystical, magical figure of this entire series. So Lando and Vufi Ra, they wind up hooking up with sort of a local guide named Toka, or his name is Mose, he is a Toka. It's this not very advanced species of beings in the Rafa system. They eventually wind up discovering this set of pyramids, one in particular, and it's really mind-bending on the inside. Like, it seems to bend time and space and everything. They wind up finding the Mind Harp, coming back out onto a planet they didn't realize they were even on. It's weird how it's bending time and space, only to wind up finding out in the long run that the Mind Harp, which is taken, of course, by the governor, and going to be used by the governor, it's not what it sounds like. It's a special device that would essentially reverse what the Toka have done to themselves. Because it turns out that the Toka are the Sharu. The reason why they disappeared was that there was some kind of external threat that they were worried about, and as a way of sort of hiding from that threat, they sort of buried their civilization underneath these pyramids and such, in fact, buried many of the pyramids and regressed themselves mentally. Sort of blocking, who they really were, blocking their real mental abilities and so forth. So apparently if he uses this, it undoes all of that. The Sharu will become themselves again, as opposed to being the Toka. They will get their full mental capacities back, and also all those pyramids and everything that's been buried is going to rise up. Problem is, there's now cities built on top of where that is. So as they rise up, it destroys the cities that are already there. Rokur-Gepta tries to stop this. It doesn't wind up working. He uses it anyway. There's a lot of devastation and such, and Lando and Vufira are able to escape as the Sharu sort of come back into their own, but Rokur-Gepta, having been essentially double-crossed by Lando, the fact that Lando is able to escape and everything here, and, basically has ruined his good situation there on the planet, he swears vengeance on Lando, making him the ongoing threat of this 3-book series. It's an interesting series. The Mindharp of the Sharu stuff really isn't that interesting, the big, cultural stuff going on in the centrality here, but what is interesting is it's introducing Vufira, who at this point is just an odd droid. We will find him being later tied into much bigger things. We'll find out more about that when we see the 3rd book in the series, and then I'll explain how it all ties into other stuff later. And this is where we're introduced to a Sorcerer of Tund. You wind up seeing the Sorcerers of Tund being borne out and explained later as being this, basically you had these Sith priests, pureblood Sith species priests, not Sith as in humans who took over the Sith and became Dark Lords of the Sith or anything like that, but the Sith pureblood species, same species we see, say, in the Old Republic. This Sith species had a splinter group of priests who left and went to the planet Tund. In doing so, they set up this very unusual type of society, but it's all Force-based. So they have these magics that are really using the Force in some way. And we wind up seeing in other materials how the Jedi from time to time come into contact with them and such, basically finding a way to take the Sorcerers of Tund and this magic and weave it into the fabric of the Force so that it all makes sense in a Star Wars grand scheme of things. They tend to do that a lot with the way that magic is used, except in some cases, like, for instance, they haven't done it too much with the Ewoks. A little, but not much. But many of these other traditions that are magic-based tend to be written off as somehow Force-based. So it's an interesting book. It's cool to see Lando on his own, although I will say, they show him with his trademark mustache here. He doesn't actually grow that till the 2nd book, so you can sort of picture a younger Lando, clean-shaven, as you're reading this book, if you're not, drawn into his old looks that we're more familiar with by the book cover here. Interesting to see him. Cool to see Vufira introduced, especially knowing what we know now that we'll talk about with the 3rd book, as far as his place in the grand scheme of things with Star Wars, and cool to see Rokur-Gepta now that we have some more background on the Sorcerers of Tund. So at the time, it probably would have been a good book, a fun read, albeit kind of a throwaway read that doesn't have a big impact on much. And now, it's a throwaway read, a story we don't necessarily need to read, but one that also introduces some concepts that we'll see borne out more in the EU. Another one of these early things being used in more modern times. So, Lando Calrissian and the Mindharp of Sharu. Is this an essential read? And I would say no. It's essential in the sense that it introduces some characters that you'll need if you want to understand the rest of the Lando Calrissian adventures, but if you're not going to read all of this, then this is not essential. So for modern readers, it is not an essential read. Pretty decent, though, for its time. Certainly a nice first outing by L. Neil Smith, although we'll wind up finding that he doesn't come back after this trilogy for whatever reason. With that, we'll wrap up this episode. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with the readers.